There are three levels of prompting cursor. One of the main ones is rules for AI under settings. That is what we are going to be talking about in this video. But there is also that cursor rules, which I'll make a separate video. And of course, just your interactions within the chat or composer. And there's also notepads. But we'll be focusing on how I use rules for AI. Here I have my rule set. The difference and beauty of rules for AI than that cursor rules is that when you set these in settings, it comes with you to every new cursor session, so you don't have to copy paste files such as cursor rules. I have actually copied this into a text file, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this and try to demonstrate to you why these are important. So we have that cursor rules file, which is empty. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. We have rules.txt, but we're not going to use it as context. So essentially, we won't have any rules or instructions for cursor. And I will just explain quickly why these are important, and then we'll test it, and I'll try to demonstrate to you what they try to do. So I like to keep my rules for AI, which goes under settings, very simple. These are all the elements or rules that I've come up with over building hundreds of apps, which actually I had to fix again and again. Such as, for example, I like term color, colorful printing to the terminal because that helps me debug my project very well. When we use vidopen to read files or write files, I would like encoding UTF-8 because otherwise we're going to get errors with some non-UTF-8 characters. Major variables being all caps variables at the top, so we can easily modify them. Model names using chat.completions instead of chat completions. So there's quite a lot, but let me demonstrate. We're going to go over these in detail. So I will explain all that, but let me just instruct cursor to do something for me real quick. And I am using the nightly version, but this is not out yet, but it's all the same. I'm just using Composer in agent mode. Okay, I have just asked cursor to create a script which will read docs.txt, which it just created as a sample, and then analyze it with GPT-4. So that is all I ask. See, write a script which will get this analyzed by GPT-4, which is the docs.txt. And as you can see, it is already, even though I mentioned to use GPT-4o, it's using GPT-4, it's using the old chat completions together. So it's making quite a lot of mistakes. So I'm going to have to fix all these. And here it's opening the requirements file without using encoding UTF-8. Here it is using encoding UTF-8 to open the docs.txt file, but sometimes it's going to use it and sometimes it's not going to use it. And it's also trying to read the environment variables from a .env file. See, I don't like this approach because I'll have to copy paste my API key all over the place in a bunch of projects. I like to read them directly from the get-env system environment variables, which I already have set up. So we really didn't need load.env. So as you can see, if I were to continue this project, I'm going to spend another 5 minutes maybe finding where the errors are and fixing them, such as going here, fixing this, fixing the model name, and whatever else. So to simplify this, see, another thing is that we don't have any print statements, not adequately. Like we don't have a print statement when we're reading docs. We don't have a print statement when we're making a call. Adequate print statements are really important, I feel like, because I don't want to review the code all the time in detail. That takes up quite a lot of time. But print statements inform me if the script is working well or not. Reviewing the code, of course, is very important, but I think just looking at print statements can be very beneficial and fast as well. So that's why now, if we come back to our rules, we do want to have term color printing. The reason we want to use term color, or I choose to use term color, is just the colorful printing, so I can see the different parts of the script executing and printing in different colors, so I can distinguish them more easily. And the second line is to use encoding UTF-8 at all times, and the variables to be at the top. For example, maybe our file variable doc.txt should be a variable at the top. Maybe our model name should be a variable at the top. Things like that. And another one is, of course, the chat completions.create, because it made that mistake, and using the model name such as GPT-4o, so it doesn't change it constantly to the old versions. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it back into the rules for AI, and I will come back here and actually re-execute this uh, composer input, which is supposed to write this. So it will actually overwrite and go back, restore, and rewrite it. Now let's see how it's going to do it this time around with these rules for AI in place. Okay, now we have our analyzed docs. Let's go ahead and accept it. As you can see, our models are defined as constants at the top, including the system prompt. We are no longer using load.env and just immediately detecting it from the system environment variables. We have colorful print statements all along the way, reading documentation, for example, and client.chat.completions has been fixed. We are also using the correct model. So, and everything has been wrapped in try and accept blocks, which is part of the rules, which we'll go over. And everything's been just separated nicely. So if you were to just run this now, we'll be able to see starting documentation analysis, reading documentation file. Documentation was read successfully and an analysis being performed. And it also saves the analysis to analysis result.txt. But now, instead of reading through the code, I can actually see if any part of the code is actually working in nicely separated, distinguished, colored print statements. So I find this very helpful. So let's go ahead and review these rules line by line and see what it actually tries to accomplish with each line. And then this I would like to say is what I learned from the way that I like to work. So consider these rules as just an example. You can actually create your own rules. Some of these you will like, some of these you'll want to change. So let's go now line by line and see what this is all about. First line is have term color printing every step of the way to inform the user. So this way we can actually easily debug it. Okay, next line is to use, whenever we're using read open, that is to read and write files, we want to use UTF-8 encoding so that sometimes your files, both by when reading and writing, is going to contain some characters that's going to just throw an error and stop your script. This will help you with that. Okay, the next one is that major variables should be all capitalized variables at the top of the script, not user input taking unless otherwise specified, including model names. So this way, we can just see all our variables at the top instead of just searching through which model I'm using or what is the file name, for example, the docs path. I can just see them at the top. I can change them. It's very convenient. That's why this is all designed to actually speed up your process. The next one let's see, is if there are models in the script like GPT-4o, O1 Mini, do not change them as they now exist. You may say, why didn't you put cloud there and things? Actually, because we are mentioning GPT-4o and also O1 Mini, it actually will be less likely to change the cloud models or Gemini models as well. But you can modify this, give it more varied examples. But this seems to work. The next one is for async tasks. Use from OpenAI, import async OpenAI. This is a mistake that models make all the time when you're trying to do parallel calls. It actually imports the regular OpenAI library and then tries to await it, and it cannot be awaited, and you're just going to get some weird errors which may confuse you. Well, I got confused so many times, and eventually add this, and so this actually fixes it. You can actually just use async OpenAI library for sequential calls too. So this is actually, in my mind, maybe better to use overall. But anyway, so that handles that. Next one is always use try except blocks with descriptive prints where necessary. Have informative error printing with the error itself. So if we go back to our try and accept blocks that is generated due to the rule that we have included, we are going to try to open the documentation. If not, if successful, we're going to print that it's succeeded. Otherwise, we're going to print an error message in red color plus the message itself, the error message. So this is, as you can see, very useful. Moving on, the next one is let's implement every project with separations of concerns in mind. If you read more about programming design principles, separations of concern is to actually keep each function or each part of the code separate so that they each perform individual and distinct tasks. So you don't try to get one part of the code or one function to do multiple things. So we just put it in there. Actually, in this case, it actually did put everything under main. So you may want to maybe, you know, specify more in detail what you want. The next one is for API keys. We use system variables, not .env file with os.getEnv. If you want to use .env file, just don't use this or change it. I find it convenient to have all my system environment variables here under environment variables for all API keys, and os.getEnv can retrieve them. So I don't have to find them, juggle them between projects. This helps me with that. Create and update requirements.txt without version numbers. As you can see, we have done that. It has done that. So it would often try to do that anyway, but it will also try to specify version numbers, which will be outdated. That's why we're just saying no version numbers. If there is no version numbers, pip install should try to install the latest ones anyway. So that helps with that. The next one is use chat.completions.create and not chat completions together. When using OpenAI libraries, chat completions is no longer in use. We saw that it worked when we are making a call. We are using the latest endpoint. So this actually saves us every time we're making an API call, it saves us time. So it's all about saving time and moving fast. Okay, so the next paragraph is web related stuff that I'd like to talk about. So this first 10 lines is essentially what you'd need. I mean, what I use, what I thought what I would need for just writing Python applications. So the next stuff is related to web. It's pretty concise, but actually gets the job done. If you look, we're asking for, if you're building web-related stuff, always use dark mode, colorful. So this is just the styling instructions. I like dark mode with some colors. This just makes everything look nicer immediately. And we are instructing to use Daisy UI, Tailwind, and Anime.js where necessary to save on code. So Tailwind is going to save you quite a lot of CSS code. And Daisy UI is going to save you even further. It's a great kind of like a template library. You can check it out, just search the web for it. And Anime.js is also going to save you quite a lot on JavaScript and doing animation. So these three, I thought, if you like other libraries, feel free to change them. But these three to me was just great. They look beautiful, to the point, and it saves you on code. The reason why we want to save on code is because the models Claude Sonnet with Cursor is going to start struggling when your code base gets to up to 1,000 lines of code and even larger than that. So any code that we can save is actually going to help us. The apply is going to work faster. Everything's just going to work faster. So that's the way I think about it. But I don't want it to skip CSS altogether. So therefore, I say you can use CSS2 for animations where necessary. Because I mean, sometimes you want to elaborate, go real elaborate with your animations. So CSS is great with that. Sonnet works great with CSS. So there you have it. And the next one is for when your user is waiting. Always have a nice waiting animation. So such as when you click a button to get a response from a model or something in the UI. There should be an animation. So this, you can ignore this sometimes, but nevertheless, it's there. So the next one is for only for Fast API apps. Fast API is a Python backend. I love it. I use it all the time. It simplifies. I also love Next.js and all the other frameworks, but for building prototyping, building quick apps that you can run and deploy, I think Fast API is unbeatable for its speed and simplicity. So here are some Fast API related instructions, such as that main.py will always be in the root folder, because sometimes in its organizational, then, if you just ask Cursor agent to build you a Fast API app, it may just create a bunch of folders and put the main.py file into a folder, which may then confuse you. I just want it to be in the root folder. I mean, Fast API apps are pretty simple anyway. I just want to see where it is. That's our server, and we want this server to run the app with main:app, because normally when you start a Fast API app, you're going to define an app and you can run it. But if you specify it like this, then you can actually run it with reload. The other way of running it won't allow reload, so I won't get into too much detail with it. But this will actually make your Fast API app run. I think the most convenient way, including with 127 IP address, that is to say 127.0.0 and 1, You don't have to specify the whole thing. It understands it 1 to 7, not 0.0.0, because sometimes that can be a bit problematic, I found. But, feel free to change it. Oh, and this one, when working on projects, do not remove any functionality that is already working. So this is to help it so that it makes less errors, removing already working code. Uh, this works to a point. It's what I'd like to do is when my projects get to about 1,000 lines, I know that Cursor may start making mistakes, removing old code and things like that. So it gives me comfort that this is here, but at a certain complexity level, I will actually myself with each message that I'm sending to Cursor, I would actually iterate. Well, please don't change any working part of the code. Don't break the code. I will reiterate it, and I seem to find that that actually helps. So this next part is a bit unrelated, but it actually highlights few important things. So I should say that this first 10 lines should be all you need for Python applications. If you're building web-related stuff, the second paragraph should help you really speed you up. If you want to use Fast API, this also will actually make it way more convenient for you to use Cursor building Fast API apps. But this next one is actually to build a Cursor rules file as you are interacting with the agent. Now, I will be making a separate video for my 1000x course that deals with the Cursor rules file separately, but essentially you can use Cursor rules file, right, to define all your project needs and description there, and then interact with the agent with that in mind, asking it to maybe implement the Cursor rules file, something like that. However, maybe you just want to start from scratch and you just want to experiment. You just want to say, well, please build this. And then you just want to iterate, just like you're chatting with ChatGPT. And in that case, this next set of instructions should be helpful to create the .cursor rules file. However, here's the thing: let's talk about this ignore in the beginning. I don't always, personally, I don't always want to do this, but it is in my rules for AI, and it comes with me to every new session with Cursor. I just tried to put ignore at the top, and it actually ignores it. So this is to say you can use an instruction like ignore. If your rules is a bit more complex, you can maybe try to do this instead of just deleting parts of it. But I would say I recommend deleting parts that you're not going to need. That would be the best way to do it. But just so you know that ignore works. And before going any further, I do like to keep this very simple. As you can see, if you remove this ignore, it's no more than 20 lines of code. Let's actually see how many lines. It's actually 15 lines of instructions, I should say. Keep your rules for AI simple. This is for the really general stuff that you're going to be needing for each one of your projects. These are the stuff that I never change, that I know will work in every one of my projects. That's the way I like to think about it. If you just start dumping a bunch of stuff in here, like documentation stuff, you're going to get model confused. The model is going to start ignoring some stuff. My recommendation is to keep it simple. Now, this next set of instructions you can read is all about getting Cursor to, while you're building the app, create a .cursor rules file. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove the ignore. Actually, let's do it over here. If I come over here and remove the ignore, now that should be in its rules. Let's actually start building something. Let's say a continuous chat with GPT-4o. So if I send this instruction, now it's going to immediately update that cursor rules file in a step-by-step fashion. It's actually building the project description as I am building. While this is going and building the app for us called continuous chat.py, I'm going to prepare the next instruction, have conversation history feature. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. Make sure when this is done, I'm going to send the second request. And with the second request, it's updating the .cursor rules file. As you can see, implement conversation history feature, and it's going to go ahead and both implement our project along with actually creating a description in the .cursor rules file with every iteration. So yeah, that's the purpose it serves, but I don't want to always use it. That's why I put ignore in the beginning, and this actually works for me. So this is it. the most important thing is to keep your rules simple. That's the way I like to think about it. There is really no difference between I mean, there is a little bit of difference, but not all that much difference what you put here, what you put in that cursor rules file, or what you put in these input boxes when you're dealing with chat and agent. But perhaps the rules under settings and the dot cursor rules are treated as system messages versus these input boxes are treated as user messages, but essentially they perform the same task. I like to think of the rules for AI as the general rules, which I'll be bringing to each and every one of my projects. That cursor rules is project specific instructions, and this chat is more for like experimentation and perhaps fixing errors. So I hope you found this useful. And I have 28 other chapters in my 1000x cursor course. I highly recommend it. And thank you.
I came across 1000x cursor course. And that's great, it just made everything super silky smooth. It just worked. I'm telling you.
1000x your coding.